This New Testament scripture reading comes from the Gospels and is found in Luke chapter 2, verses 21 through 24. After 8 days had passed, it was time to circumcise the child, and he was called Jesus, the name given by the angel before he was conceived in the womb. When the time came for their purification, according to the law of Moses, they brought him up to Jerusalem to present him to the Lord. As it is written in the law of the Lord, every firstborn male shall be designated as holy to the Lord. And they offered a sacrifice according to what is stated in the law of the Lord, a pair of turtle doves or 2 young pigeons. The word of the Lord.
Please be with me in a spirit of prayer. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O God. May you empower us with your Spirit, that we may respond not only in our minds, but also with our words and actions. Amen. Today, we are starting a 12-week sermon series on some of the most significant biblical stories about Jesus. From now until Easter, and in roughly chronological order, we will explore the very well-known anecdotes from Jesus' life. This morning, we start at the very beginning, a very good place to start, with the birth of Jesus. You may be wondering, didn't we just cover this material? Christmas was 1 month ago. Why on earth are we still talking about this? However, Jesus' birth is one of the most celebrated and cherished moments of his life. Moreover, in the Gospel of Luke, the birth of Jesus sets the stage for the rest of his mission, message, and ministry. This specific birth narrative gives us a window into Jesus' familial and social context, a window we must look through if we want to better understand the remainder of his life and eventual death. As we sit at this metaphorical window contemplating the birth of Jesus, let's imagine we're peering into a magical portal, a portal that allows us to travel through time and space. If we lean in just a little, we get sucked into this vortex and land in Bethlehem. It's roughly 2,025 years ago. The air is much warmer, the surrounding village is much poorer, and we're definitely not in Massachusetts anymore. As we take a look around, we realize we've been dropped into a cozy one-room stable, the location of the famous nativity scene. The small shelter is completely barren. Beams of light streak through the narrow cracks in the wooden ceiling. Dust particles rise from the floor and dance in the sun's rays. Apart from a slightly damp water trough, the room is empty and quiet. It turns out our portal is a little wonky, and we've missed the birth of Jesus by 8 days. Luckily, there's more to be explored here. Today is the day when Jesus will be named, circumcised, and presented in the temple. Would you like to go see? It's a 6-mile trek from here to the temple in Jerusalem, so we better get started. On our roughly 3-hour walk, several verses from Mary's Magnificat get stuck in our head. Her radiant voice echoes in our ears. Although the tune may be new to us, the melody is actually ancient. Like a musical artist who has covered the song of another, Mary's song mimics the voice of a different Israelite mother, a woman named Hannah. In the Hebrew Bible, in 1 Samuel chapter 2, Hannah celebrates the birth of her son, Samuel, with a very similar song of praise. This musical mirroring serves as a reminder of Mary and Jesus' ancestry as Jews. In this joyful song, Mary sings with confidence of God's movement and the creation of dramatic reversals throughout history. She declares God looked with favor upon the lowly. God scattered the proud. God brought down the powerful from their thrones and lifted up the oppressed, filling the hungry with good things and sending the rich away empty. Yet, as we survey the landscape on our journey to the temple, we might say that Mary's joy is premature. On our travels, we pass by pompous Roman soldiers, feeble peasants, and wandering farm animals. For several decades, the Roman Empire has controlled this land by imposing harsh taxes upon its citizens. In this era, a majority of people are poor farmers, shepherds, craftsmen, and merchants. They live at a subsistence level, only having enough money to afford food on a day-by-day basis. In this generation, the reversals Mary sang about haven't happened yet. Wealthy kings continue to sit haughtily on their thrones, while the lowly starve in the shadows. This young mother's song would be the work of her son and the work of generations to come. As we approach the temple, we arrive in time to see Mary completing her mandatory purification rites. These rites hark back to a decree in the book of Exodus and the book of Leviticus. In the book of Exodus, it is written that every firstborn son will be presented in the temple and will be dedicated to the Lord. In the book of Leviticus, it says that if the new mother cannot afford a sheep as an offering for her purification rites, she can instead use 2 turtle doves or 2 pigeons. We see Mary carrying 2 small birds in one arm and a snugly swaddled and sleeping Jesus in another. From this display, we can tell Jesus was born to a loving, poor, and pious Jewish family. Over the next several weeks, as we continue to delve into the life and ministry of Jesus, it is critical to remember that Jesus was raised in a Jewish family and grew up to be a Jewish man who, by and large, ministered to other Jewish people. At this juncture, there is not much more to see here, so let's head back to the future. As I was writing this message this week, one question continued to crawl to the forefront of my mind. At this point in his 8-day-year-old life, who was Jesus? In Christian circles, we often use the word incarnation to describe the way Jesus is the tangible expression and embodiment of God. In one article I read in preparation for the sermon, the author, David A. Palin, a theologian, senior lecturer, and the head of the Department of Philosophy of Religion at Manchester University in England, defines incarnation as God, quote, peculiarly present in human flesh. Peculiarly present. Importantly, the revelation of God in Jesus does not deny the revelation of God in other forms, figures, or generations. According to Palin, quote, the proper Christian claim is not that God has not, or will not, or cannot reveal God's self in other incarnations, for how can we determine what God will or will not do? But that in Jesus we believe we have a decisive revelation of God, unquote. Thus, Jesus may define, but does not confine the workings and activity of God. According to Christian theology, the limited number of recorded events that we have from the life of Jesus of Nazareth, presented in the Gospels, provide insight into the character of God. From birth to death, Jesus acts as a living parable, a walking, talking narrative that provides those he lived with, as well as contemporary Christians, with an illustration of God. Intriguingly, the gospel narratives are not concerned with the how of God's presence, but with the what of God's action. The Gospels do not ask, how is God there? They merely seek to answer, what is God doing there? So, what is God doing in the body of a baby? What can a baby teach us about God? In this instance of Jesus' birth, the incarnation is not only peculiar, but particular. In this narrative, God is depicted as small and helpless, vulnerable and soft, susceptible to the elements of life. In this birth story, we are given a picture of God as an entity that tenderly enters a hurting world with an arms wide open and all-embracing love. This is a God that is relational and dependent on forming relationships with the people surrounding them. When we are babies, we love with our whole beings. Likewise, our whole selves yearn for love. We seek affection, basic sustenance, and freedom to explore and experience the great wide world with the wonder and naivety of a young child. Infants absorb the world with all of their senses. There's so much to see, to hear, to taste, to touch, to smell. They wiggle and flail their chubby arms and legs with glee as they celebrate the mysterious miracle of being alive. If we are lucky, from the moment we emerge from the womb, we are met with love. According to author Norman Pittenger, an Anglican priest, teacher, and theologian, quote, "Someone moves toward us in love, and that movement awakens in us the response of love. That is, to know oneself as loved is to be given a purpose in life, towards the realization of which we thereafter give ourselves. We know that we are loved. Therefore, we strive to live in response to such love, to make ourselves recipient of it, to express this response in our daily life." End quote. From the onset of his birth, it is clear that Jesus is beloved. We can tell from the rest of his ministry that he has learned to share this love with those around him. Yet, like any other infant, Jesus was dependent on the life forms and forces that surrounded him. He was fragile, fleshy, and malleable. Although he was tiny, he was large with possibility. And although he was weak, he held so much potential. We have the privilege of hearing the story of Jesus' birth with knowing minds and hearts. We know how his story will end. Yet, for those that lived within this narrative, the life of Jesus was still very much underway, unknown and uncertain. For better or worse, our own lives are very much the same. We do not choose to be born. We do not get to choose the day we are born. We do not get to choose the family we are born into. We do not choose what we are named. We do not choose the color of our skin, our assigned gender at birth, our ethnicity, our allergens, our siblings, or our parents. We do not choose the geography of our birthplace, nor the historical era we are born into, nor do we choose the immediate circumstances of our upbringing. However, despite these constraints, we do, to some extent, get the opportunity to choose how we live. In Desmond Tutu's The Book of Joy, Lasting Happiness in a Changing World, he says, quote, "We are fragile creatures, and it is from this weakness, not despite it, that we discover the possibility of true joy." Unquote. If you're anyone like me, perhaps you sometimes feel insecure or small. Perhaps you sometimes feel ashamed and burdened by your past or that something that happened in it. But like Jesus, from our birth and beyond, we are made in the image and likeness of God. This means that we too hold the promise of God's awesome power inside of us. We have the power to fight the urge to close ourselves off from the world, to shut down and to turn away, and instead choose to live in love, through love, and with love. One wonderful thing about Christmas is that every year, without fail, we can count on Jesus showing up in the same messy, chaotic, uncertain times of suffering as he did thousands of years ago. From this famous birth story, we can continue to witness the ways God works in the margins, in the darkness, and in the most turbulent of times. As time continues to move forward, your life story is gradually unfolding. And unless someone here is a time traveler, we have no way to tell what our future holds. Yet, within this great unfolding, we can hold on to the hope that change is always taking place. A new life is always about to spring forth. As our lives unfold, all we can do is live, laugh, cry, love, and keep reaching out to others unabashedly for comfort, for support, and companionship. I think only then will we be able to discover the many ways God is present in us, to us, and around us. Leading up to Christmas, I read a daily Advent devotional by Pastor John Pavlovitz called Lo, an honest Advent devotional. On Christmas Day, he wrote this, quote, "Today I read that an estimated 250 children are born every minute, about 4 per second. 4 distinct, beautiful lives arriving in the width of a breath. In the time it takes to blink, staggering potential is released again and again and again. Right now, in this second, birth is taking place. Light is breaking in. Possibility is being born. You don't need to fully embrace Christian orthodoxy or even be a particularly religious person to embrace the dawn in every second, in the ways the planet is always being made new, and in the reality that we get to participate in all of it while we're here. Every day we open our eyes and greet the sun, we are gifted a Christmas miracle. Today is a birthday, and this is the greatest of good news."